Part 1. The Hook, the book that cost its author millions in 1979. A man wrote a book, so powerful, so revolutionary, that he later admitted it cost him more money than he ever earned from it. That man was Doyle Brunson, Texas Dolly, the godfather of poker, two-time World Series of Poker champion, a legend who played poker professionally for over 60 years, a man who saw players shot dead at the table during the dangerous underground games of the 1960s, and his book, Super System, a course in power poker. They call it the Bible of Poker. It was originally titled How I Made Over $1 Million Playing Poker and sold for $100 per copy in $1,979. Today, that's like paying $400 for a book, and people still bought it. Why? Because Doyle Brunson did something nobody had ever done before. He took the secret strategies that professional players had guarded for decades, the techniques that separated the sharks from the fish, and he wrote them all down. When the book came out, other professionals were furious. Brunson had given away the keys to the kingdom. Suddenly, amateur players could learn in a weekend what the pros had taken lifetimes to master. Here's the shocking part. 46 years later, most modern players still haven't absorbed these lessons. They're too busy studying GTO charts on their computers, too busy memorizing solver outputs, too busy with the technical science of poker to understand what Doyle understood from day one. Poker is a people game played with cards, not a card game played with people. In this video, I'm going to teach you everything important from Super System, but better than the book itself. I'm going to simplify 624 pages of dense strategy into clear, actionable wisdom that you can use today. By the end, you'll understand the timeless principles that made Doyle Brunson one of the greatest players who ever lived. Principles that still crush modern players who've never taken the time to learn them. This is the foundation every serious poker player needs. Let's begin. Part 2. The foundation poker is a people game. Before we get into specific strategies, let me give you the single most important lesson from Super System. If you remember nothing else, remember this: poker is a game of people. That's the most important lesson you should learn. Doyle opens his book with this truth, because everything else flows from it. You could program a computer to calculate perfect mathematical poker. But as Doyle wrote, no computer could ever stand face to face with a table full of people it had never met before, and make quality, high-profit decisions based on psychology. Here's what that means for you. More than any other game, poker depends on understanding your opponent. You've got to know what makes him tick. More importantly, you've got to know what makes him tick at the moment you re-involved in a pot with him. Ask yourself these questions about every opponent. What's his mood right now? Is he in the mood to gamble? Or is he waiting for the nuts? Is he a loser on tilt, playing below his capability? Or has he screwed down and started playing his best despite losing? Is he a cocky winner playing carelessly? Or is he protecting his gains with tight play? This is what separates reading poker from playing poker. Most modern players sit at the table staring at their phones between hands. They're not watching. They're not learning. They're missing 90% of the information available to them. Doyle was different. He studied every player, every hand, whether he was involved or not. He watched how they bet, how they hesitated, how they stacked their chips, how they breathed. Concentrate on everything when you're playing, he wrote. Watch and listen. Remember, you have to do both, and relate the two. You listen to what your opponent says, but you watch what he's doing independently of what he says. Often, they tell different stories. This foundation changes everything. It means poker isn't about playing your cards, it's about playing your opponent. Once you understand this, strategy transforms from a rigid system into a flexible weapon. You adapt, hand by hand, player by player. Part 3. The style that wins. Tight, aggressive, solid play. Now let us talk about the playing style that Doyle Brunson championed, the style that still wins at every level of poker today. Everyone knows the terms tight and aggressive, but Doyle made an important distinction that most players miss. Tight means conservative. A tight player is tight pretty much all the time, but a solid player is tight about entering a pot in the first place. But after he enters the pot, he becomes aggressive. This is the key insight. Solid play, not just tight play. A purely tight player waits for premium hands and plays them straightforwardly, predictable, exploitable, easy to fold against. A solid player is selective before the flop, but once they enter a pot, they play with power. They bet, they raise, they put pressure on opponents. They make other players face difficult decisions. Timid players don't win in high-stakes poker. Doyle declared. The math supports this. When everyone at the table plays by the odds, they usually fold, and a lot of money gets left on the table. The aggressive player who enters more pots and plays them with conviction picks up all that scared money. But, and this is crucial, aggression without selection is stupidity. Doyle tells the story of a famous player who could read hands perfectly. He could figure out exactly what you were holding. But when he decided you had jacks, and his hand couldn't beat jacks, he would try to bluff you off your hand anyway. To me, that's not being aggressive. That's being stupid, Doyle wrote. Should you jeopardize your money when you think your opponent has a good hand? Let him win the pot and wait until you think he doesn't have much of anything. That's when you try to bluff him out. The lesson: aggression is a tool, not a religion. You deploy it when circumstances favor you, when opponents show weakness, when the board favors your perceived range, when the pot is worth fighting for. Solid play equals selective entry plus aggressive execution. This formula hasn't changed in 46 years, because human psychology hasn't changed. People still don't like facing bets. People still fold too much under pressure. Solid play still prints money. Part 4. Reading your opponents. The Art of Tells. One of Super System's most valuable sections comes from Mike Curran, the mad genius of poker, who contributed a detailed analysis of tells, the unconscious signals that reveal what your opponent is really thinking. Here's the master principle from Caro's work. Almost all players have tells, those giveaway moves that are almost as revealing to a rival who has spotted them as actually showing him your cards. Let me give you some specific tells that still work. Today, the neck pulse tell. The most common tell is the pulse in a man's neck. On a lot of people, the pulse is visible. A man can't hide it since nobody can control their heartbeat in stress situations. When you see a man's neck just throbbing away, you know he's excited. And usually he's excited because he is bluffing. The timing tell. Hesitation before a big bet often means different things. Quick bet after a good card equals usually strength. They've made their hand and want to bet before you see their excitement. Long pause then big bet equals often a bluff. They're acting, trying to pretend they're making a difficult decision. The strong means weak principle. This is Caro's most famous insight. Players who act strong are usually weak. Players who act weak are usually strong. Why? Because humans instinctively try to deceive. When a player throws chips aggressively into the pot with a theatrical flourish, they're often compensating for a weak hand. When a player bets apologetically, looking unsure, they often have a monster. The behavior pattern tell. Once you've identified a player's basic style, don't assume it's constant. As Doyle wrote, if you see a guy sitting there chewing gum and bouncing his leg up and down, you know he's anxious to get into action. He came to play. It's not safe to bluff him. But if you see someone sitting back, looking bored, uninterested, he can be bluffed more easily. The key is developing your own tells defense while reading others. Doyle tells the story. Amarillo Slim once pointed out that I was counting my chips when I had a hand, and just pushing them in without counting when I was bluffing. That's the only tell anyone had on me that I know about. He then developed a character tell, sometimes saying certain phrases when bluffing, then using those same phrases with strong hands. Keep them guessing. Part 5. Pot odds. The math you actually need. Now let's cover the mathematics of poker. Don't worry, Doyle kept it simple because the core concepts are simple. All your efforts in poker are directed toward getting in a position to bet the maximum amount you can on the hands that are worth it. Here's the essential concept. Pot odds are the ratio between what's in the pot and what it costs you to call. If there's $100 in the pot and it costs you $20 to call, you're getting 5-to-1 pot odds. Now compare that to your chance of making your hand your outs. Example, you have a flush draw with one card to come. You need one of 9 remaining cards in your suit. With 46 unseen cards, your odds are roughly 41 against. If you're getting 5 to -1 pot odds on a 4-to-1 draw, you should call. The math is in your favor. If you're only getting to 2 -1 pot odds on the same draw, you should fold. The math says you'll lose money long term. But here's where Doyle's wisdom goes beyond basic math. In No Limit, the important thing is not the pot odds you're getting right now, but the potential amount of money you can win if you hit your hand. This is what we now call implied ODDs. If your opponent has a big stack and will pay you off when you hit, a seemingly bad call becomes profitable. Example, you're getting to 2 -1 pot odds on a 4-to-1 flush draw. Normally a fold. But if your opponent has $500 behind and will put it all in when the flush comes, Now the effective odds are much better. Doyle's advice: sometimes you should gamble and take that 5-to-1 shot. The reward makes the risk worthwhile, but there's a limit to gambling. Anytime you extend your bankroll so far that if you lost it would really distress you, you probably will lose. It's tough to play your best under that much pressure. The math serves the strategy, not the other way around. Calculate the odds, but factor in the total situation, your opponent, their stack, their tendency to pay off, your read on the hand. Part 6. The revolutionary concept, suited connectors. One of Supersystem's most revolutionary concepts was Doyle's advocacy for playing suited connectors. Hands like 7, 6, 8, 7, or 9, 8 in the 1970s. Most players played tight poker, waiting for high cards like Akekaku or big pairs. They considered small suited connectors to be garbage hands. Doyle saw something they didn't. When everyone plays by the odds, they usually fold, and a lot of money gets left on the table. Here's his insight: if your opponents only play high cards, they become predictable. When the flop comes with low cards like 4, 5, 7, they almost certainly missed. You can bet and take the pot, regardless of what you hold. But it gets better. Suited connectors have massive hidden potential. Whenever you have small connecting cards that are suited, the ideal flop would be 3 cards that made your straight, 2 of which are in your suit to give you a flush draw also. If you run into someone who flopped the same straight you did but without the flush draw, well, that's a no-limit player's dream. The biggest pots in poker come from situations where both players think they have strong hands. When you hold 6 to 7 of spades and the flop comes for 5-8 with 2 spades, and your opponent has pocket kings, they think they're ahead. You know you're ahead with the straight, and you have a flush draw backup. That's the magic of suited connectors. They make hands that look like they should lose but actually win huge pots. Doyle's tactical advice for playing them: I usually limp in with this hand rather than raise. When you limp in with small connectors in early position, you're actually playing them like you would to aces. There's deception there. If someone raises behind you, you can call with excellent implied odds, knowing they likely have big cards that will pay you off if you hit. The concept revolutionized poker. Today, suited connectors are standard in every solver and training course, but in 1979, this was secret knowledge that the pros guarded jealously. Doyle gave it away for $100, and modern players who still don't understand why suited connectors work are missing half the game. Part 7. Position. The name of the game. We covered position deeply in a previous video, but let me give you Doyle's specific take on it, because he puts it even more starkly than modern teachers. In No Limit Hold'em, position is, well, it's the name of the game. It's everything. Then he makes an outrageous claim: if I had position all night, I could beat the game, and I'd never have to look at my whole cards. Think about what he's saying. The greatest poker player in the world claims that, with position, he doesn't even need good cards to win. That's how powerful acting last truly is. Why is position so dominant in No Limit specifically? In limit poker, bets are fixed. Even if you have perfect information, you can only bet a certain amount. The advantage of position is smaller. In No Limit, you can bet an NY amount up to all your chips. Perfect information lets you make devastating bets big enough to put your opponent in an impossible spot. Doyle's specific positional advice: early position, you should almost never re-raise with queens or jacks before the flop, expecting to get all your money in. You don't want to, because if you get played with, you're either a big dog or a small favorite. This was revolutionary in 1979, when most players would slam queens all in. Doyle understood that early position queens face action from players who likely have aces or kings. Late position. The only reason I don't like to raise with small connecting cards is because when someone has the hand, I want them to have a big pair. They're going to re-raise me. That's why I usually limp in with them. But from late position with no raises in front of you, everything changes. You can open much wider and play aggressively after the flop. The button. On the button, you can play almost anything and make it work. The lesson is simple but profound. Adjust your strategy dramatically based on where you're sitting. The same hand that's an easy fold in early position becomes a profitable raise on the button. Position before cards. Always. Part 8. The chip psychology. Think in units, not dollars. Here's a psychological insight from Supersystem that separates professionals from amateurs. Always play for chips, rather than cash. Chips are easier to win, Doyle explains. A $5 chip is the same size as a $500 chip. It's just not the same color. If you bet a man $20,000 in $500 chips, that's only 40 chips, 2 stacks. But if you bet him $20,000 in $100 bills, it would be a big pile of money. Why does this matter? Because the psychology of money affects your decisions. When you think about dollars, you think about rent, food, bills, reality. And that reality makes you scared. Scared players make bad decisions. It's to your own advantage to think of chips as units, not money. You may consider your money status before the game and after the game, but while the game is in progress, it is only a game, and the chips are just units. You're trying to win as many units as you can. This mental shift is essential for high-level play. Here's another crucial concept about chips you've already bet. Money you have already bet is no longer yours, regardless of how much is involved. You no longer own any money you've already put in the pot. It belongs to the pot. This destroys the sunk cost fallacy that ruins amateur players. You put $200 in the pot. The river comes. You're almost certainly beat, but you say, I've already put in so much, I might as well call. Wrong. That $200 is gone. The only question is, does calling this bet make sense based on current odds? If not, fold. Previous investment is irrelevant. Doyle puts it bluntly, don't throw good money after bad. The opposite is also true. If you VA only put in $50, but the situation now calls for a $500 bet to win, make the bet. The size of your previous investment doesn't determine your current action. Only the current math matters. Professional players think in units. They separate the game from real life. They make decisions based on expected value, not emotional attachment to money already wagered. This single psychological adjustment can transform a losing player into a winner. Part 9. Bluffing, the art and science. Bluffing is the heart of poker's romance. Everyone loves a great bluff. But Doyle's approach to bluffing is more nuanced than most players understand. You have to pick your players to bluff. You can hardly bluff a sucker at all, whereas any good player can be bluffed. Wait, it's easier to bluff good players than bad ones. Yes, here's why. A bad player plays when he has a hand and folds when he doesn't. He doesn't think about what you have, he only thinks about his own cards. If he has something, he'll call. Your bluff won't work. A good player thinks about what you might have. When you represent strength, a good player can fold, even with a decent hand, because they believe you. If you call and beat a man who always checks to you, you call and beat anyone. The perfect opponent is what Doyle calls a calling station. Someone who just calls, never raises, never folds. Against this player, never bluff. Just bet your good hands for value, and check your weak ones. Here's Doyle's golden rule for bluffing. You should never start out bluffing at a pot and keep bluffing at it without an out. What's an out? A card that can improve your hand. If you're bluffing with complete air, no pair, no draw, nothing, you're taking a one-time gamble. If it fails, you lose everything. But if you're bluffing with a flush draw or straight draw, you have backup. If called, you might still hit your hand. This is what we now call a semi-bluff, and Doyle pioneered the concept. Semi-bluffing is powerful because it gives you two ways to win. 1. Opponent folds, you win immediately. 2. Opponent calls, you can still hit your draw and win when and how much to bluff. In limit poker, bluffing is more about frequency. You bluff a certain percentage of the time to keep opponents honest. In no limit, bluffing requires real strategy and the ability to size up your opponent. Big bluffs in no limit are rare but devastating when they work. Small bluffs, stabbing at pots when opponents show weakness, should be constant. The accumulation of small stolen pots adds up to massive profits over time. Part 10. Playing specific hands, aces, kings, and traps. Let S get into Doyle's specific hand advice, some of which goes against what modern solvers suggest. But remember, he's teaching you to beat humans, not computers. Pocket aces and kings. This is contrary to the way most people play them. Most players feel that aces and kings are so hard to come by that when they get them, they want to win a big pot, so they play them real fast. That's usually wrong. Wait, don't fast play aces. Doyle's reasoning, with a pair of aces or kings, one of two things will usually happen. Either everyone folds and you win a small pot, or someone calls and you're vulnerable to getting outdrawn. His preferred approach, control the pot size. Let opponents develop hands that they'll pay you with. If you raise huge preflop with aces and everyone folds, you've won blinds. If you let them see a flop cheaply and they make second best hands, you can win stacks. This is situational, of course. Against aggressive players who will re-raise you, fast playing works. Against passive players, slow playing extracts more. Bottom to pair. Here's a trap that catches players constantly. Another time players give far too much value to a hand is when they flop the bottom two pair. For example, when they play 8 to 7 and the flop comes K2-7. If they're up against AK, they're in a very dangerous situation. Why? Because AK can improve to a bigger two pair or trips, while your bottom two pair can't improve much. You're either ahead now or dead. Doyle's advice: don't fall in love with two pair. Play it cautiously unless you have reason to believe you're way ahead. Ice King. Ice King is a drawing hand, not a made hand. It needs to improve to be worth anything. Modern players often overvalue RK, especially pre-flop. Doyle's approach: use RK to see flops, but be willing to release it if you miss completely. A K that doesn't pair is just ice. The comeback hand: you should always remember that the flop is practically the whole game in Hold'em. That's where your major decisions will be made. If you miss the flop badly, let it go. Don't chase. Wait for the next opportunity. The flop determines everything in Hold'em poker. Part 11. Table image and deception becoming unreadable. Here's where poker becomes art instead of science. Doyle understood that long-term success requires being unpredictable. If you get a reputation for playing only when you have the best of it, you'll get very few people to play against you. This is the paradox of tight play. It works in the short term but eventually destroys itself. If everyone knows you only bet with premium hands, they simply fold whenever you bet. You win tiny pots and never get paid. Doyle's solution: build a table image that serves your strategy. I make plays to establish a reputation as an action man who is willing to risk significant money in a game, even without substantial advantage. Action is the most important aspect of the reputation a professional player can have. Why does Doyle want people to play against him? Because, if an aggressive player comes in more often, they're in position to pick up all that scared money. He wants action. He wants players calling him down. He wants to build pots, because over time, his skill advantage will crush them. Mixing up your play against a higher grade player, someone who could be thinking along the same lines as you, mix up your play. Sometimes you make an obvious play, sometimes you make a play that's not so obvious. Against weak players, play straightforward. They don't notice patterns, they don't adjust. Just outplay them fundamentally. Against good players, you need deception. Sometimes slow play your monsters. Sometimes fast play your draws. Keep them guessing. The image paradox. Here's a fascinating insight. By playing some bad hands, well, you get paid on your good hands. If opponents see you win with 6 to 7 suited, they'll call you down when you have pocket aces. That's the opposite of what they should do. But human psychology works against them. Once opponents catch on to the fact that you play all sorts of funny cards, you'll actually be able to bluff more. They'll fear you flopped something weird. This is the complete game. Tight enough to have winners, loose enough to get action, aggressive enough to push opponents around, deceptive enough to keep them guessing. That's the super system style. It's been winning for 46 years. Part 12. The mental game, discipline, tilt, and longevity. Let's finish with the psychological framework that allowed Doyle Brunson to play professional poker for 60 years. Failure should be our teacher, not our undertaker. Poker is a game of constant failure. You'll lose hands, you'll get unlucky, you'll make mistakes. The question is, how do you respond? Controlling emotion. You can't let emotion get in the way of making the right play. Doyle watched players go broke because they couldn't handle a bad beat. They'd tilt play recklessly, chase losses, make terrible decisions. Hours of good play destroyed in minutes of emotional explosion. His advice: develop alligator blood. Nothing affects you. Bad beats roll off. You make the same quality decision on hand 1000 that you made on hand 1. On bankroll management, don't risk more than you can afford to lose. Simple, powerful, and ignored by 90% of players. Doyle saw countless talented players go broke because they played too high for their bankroll. One bad session, which will happen eventually, ends their career. Conservative bankroll management isn't about fear, it's about longevity. You need to survive the inevitable downswings to reach the inevitable upswings. On improvement, the best way to improve your poker game is through experience. Learn from your mistakes and constantly strive to get better. After every session, Doyle and his partners would replay key hands. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? How could you do better? Modern players have software. solvers, training sites. Doyle had pencil and paper, but the process is identical. Review, analyze, improve. What took me decades to learn, these kids can get on the internet. He said this without bitterness, with admiration for how quickly modern players could learn. But he also noted, technical knowledge isn't everything. Psychology, discipline, emotional control, these still require hard experience. The ultimate lesson, making quality decisions is the only thing you get paid for in poker. Not winning hands, not getting lucky. Decisions, you can make a perfect decision and lose. You can make a terrible decision and win. Over time, good decisions always beat bad decisions. Focus on the process, not the results. That's how you play for 60 years and remain a winner. Conclusion, the timeless Bible. Let me bring this all together. Super System was published in 1979. The poker world has transformed since then. Online play, GTO solvers, training sites, millions of hands of data. You'd think an ancient book would be obsolete. But here's the truth. Most modern players have memorized solver outputs without understanding WHY. Those plays work. They know the what but not the why. They can recite ranges but can't read opponents. They can calculate pot odds but can't feel the table dynamics. Super System teaches the WHY. Why aggression works, because humans fold under pressure. Why position matters, because information is power. Why tells exist, because humans can't hide their emotions perfectly. Why suited connectors profit, because they crack big hands disguised as small. Why discipline wins, because poker is a marathon, not a sprint. These principles haven't changed because human nature hasn't changed. We still get scared. We still tilt. We still make emotional decisions. We still telegraph our strength and weakness through unconscious tells. Doyle Brunson, the godfather of poker, wrote down everything he knew, and it cost him millions at the tables because his opponents learned his secrets. He did it anyway because he believed in the game. Now I've given you those secrets in a format even better than the book, condensed, clarified, updated for modern understanding. Use them wisely. If this video transformed how you think about poker, smash that like button. It tells the algorithm to share this knowledge with players who need it. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Every video I make will help you become a better, more profitable player. Drop a comment. What lesson from Super System surprised you most? What will you implement first? And remember Doyle's words. Poker isn't about winning or losing. Poker is about making the right decision. Make the right decision. Subscribe now. See you at the tables.